Don't be afraid, okay? Little girl?
I love zombies. I can't get enough of them. And I'm not alone. Zombies are a huge part of pop culture. Hordes of undead fans just can't get enough of them, which has enabled zombies to get their undead hands in all sorts of media, which includes video games, TV, books, comics, movies, music, and musicals. Fascinating. Anyway, we're not going to be talking about the zombie musical genre today. Today we're going to be jumping into why World War Z the book is way better than World War Z the movie. Now you're probably wondering, how can a movie with Brad Pitt be bad? I mean, movies change things about books all the time. And to that, I would say, look at the Hobbit trilogy, or, that one scene in Harry Potter.
I protest!
Harry, you put your name in a goblet of fire? Dumbledore asked calmly.
There are many examples of movies making deviations from the source material and it being received poorly by the fans. And all I'm saying is that the movie World War Z goes so far off the source material that it doesn't even resemble the book. If you don't believe me, take a look at what the author Max Brooks had to say about it.
And it was optioned for a movie, and it got turned into a movie, and the movie and the book really don't have a lot in common. They've got a great title.
Now don't get me wrong, I don't think the movie is terrible. In fact, there's some cool elements to it, Brad Pitt being kind of a badass. I do kind of like that. As well as the zombies and the way they kind of crawl all over each other, or they stack up along each other along the walls of Jerusalem. That stuff is cool, but that's kind of just it. It's a big summer blockbuster spectacle. It's fun to watch and stuff, but you don't really take anything away from it at the end of the day. Now, me saying that I do not like big summer blockbuster spectacles may make you think that I actually don't like spectacle and scale, but you'd be dead wrong. You see, it's funny because the book has a sense of scale that can never be matched by a movie. Imagine going to all these different locations like castles, mountain ranges, the catacombs of Paris, down in the deep dark depths of the ocean, and even outer space. There's a plethora of cool and unique stories in this book that they could have pulled from for the movie, but nah. They went with a generic ex-military man, goes to a few generic locations on a generic mission, and single-handedly finds the cure to a deadly disease. Do you get what I'm saying? It's a very, generic plot. There's not really much to it. In the book, you're constantly going from place to place and learning about different people and how they are surviving during this big apocalyptic event, and how they are dealing with that situation. The book and the movie both end up going to Jerusalem, where a massive wall has been erected around the entire city, which is really cool and interesting, both for the book and the movie. But the difference is, I feel like it's more realistic in the book, because the book's apocalypse seems to take about over a year to take over, while in the movie, it feels like it's happening within a couple days. And yeah, the zombies are different in both the book and the movie, but building a wall to that scale would be nearly impossible to do within a couple days. And yeah, it's implied that they kinda knew beforehand, but I still find it fairly unrealistic. Now at this point I am just nitpicking, so I'm just going to move on from the topic, but hopefully it's given you an understanding of what I mean. The movie's locations just feel really underdeveloped and there's not much thought put into them. It's funny that I mention how unrealistic the movie is when you look at the book's virus and how it spreads. I was one of those people when I was reading the book, I was sitting there how could the entire world not recognize that these things are coming back to life and start attacking people? And I've always had that thought throughout most apocalyptic movies and apocalyptic media in general. But now that we've gone through, or are still going through, the COVID-19 pandemic, I realize how fairly accurate the book is to real life. China actually covers up the zombie virus that is being spread throughout the book. And then in the US, someone makes up a vaccine which isn't really a vaccine, but it's to make people feel more comfortable. Kind of like how, Donald Trump is like trying to, make people feel more comfortable and like actually come back out of the house again so we can get the economy going. And looking back to the book, I actually realized that there was a whole lot of refugee crisis going on, kind of like how the real world has such a huge refugee crisis problem, which causes the virus to spread faster. And it's really interesting how much research seemed to have been put into the book in order for it to, feel like a tangible thing that could happen, even though it's just Romero zombies, running around and eating people. I mean, to some people, I probably just sound like I'm stating the obvious, like, aha, look at the floor, the floor looks like the floor, But I actually find this stuff kind of fascinating, especially since, again, we are going through this huge pandemic and people are denying that it exists. Just kind of like in the book, where people are just still kind of like, oh, I don't know if these zombies exist. I don't know. It's weird how the zombie virus can relate to COVID-19. It brings a new light to the book and it makes it feel more fleshed out. I would actually highly recommend going and actually reading World War Z if you haven't already, just to kind of like understand what I'm actually kind of talking about here. But I mean, I would understand if you don't go back, because I mean, I don't think any of us want to live through another pandemic, especially since we're going through a global pandemic right now. And I don't think too many people are keen on experiencing a pandemic in fiction. But if you are interested, go give it a good read. I think it's quite a decent book. Anyway, back to the topic at hand. I talked about Brad Pitt's character, and I called him a generic ex-military man. But what I did not mention is that he also has a family to protect, and, it makes him like every other bland action movie hero, to the point that I can't even remember the main character's name. Oh, it's Jerry, but with a G. I guess that's kind of different because it's, got a G instead of a J. No, I don't like the sound of it. Sorry, Jerry's with G's, but your names aren't unique enough for me, man. But hey, look on the bright side. You're probably a more interesting man than this character in the movie. Thing is, there's a ton of characters in the books that are way more fleshed out than Jerry, and most of the passages take like 10 to 20 minutes to read, while the movie has 2 hours and you barely learn anything interesting about Jerry. He's a bog standard hero with no flaws whatsoever. Like I said, Jerry doesn't have any flaws. He's an amazing father, he's a perfect soldier, and he just doesn't really make too many mistakes. The one example of a mistake he made was during the scene where he is trying to sneak into a military base in Korea, and he decides to leave his phone on for some reason. But that's just a very, plot convenient mistake, so the zombies can attack them and there's a panic. It just felt like another way to get the zombies into the movie again, so people aren't getting bored, so like another action scene for the excitement and the tension and stuff like that. But it just didn't work for me because it's such a stupid mistake that his perfect character shouldn't have made that mistake. I don't know. It's a weird fine line for me, and I'm probably being too nitpicky still, but I just don't like Jerry as a character because he is too perfect. I feel like I cannot relate to him as much. Personally, I think a character with flaws is more interesting, like a character who decides to look out for themselves instead of protecting others, which would naturally create conflict in the story. If there was a character who does like to protect people, that would create a more natural conflict rather than hearing a phone ring all of a sudden. And hey, it could even be the opposite way around. We're following the perfect character who's willing to protect people while he is having arguments with the man who might not want to protect people. And that's not the only type of character that I want in these types of movies. That's just like an example. There's one interview in the book that I actually really like, and I want to tell you about it. But the thing is, I do not know how to say the character's name, so I'm just gonna flash it up on screen here now. Sorry, I just didn't want to butcher the name because I really am bad at saying people's names. But anyway, this character is a part of a nuclear submarine crew in China, and his captain decides that they do not want to fight the war in China anymore because they are just sending people to their deaths. So they decide to steal the nuclear submarine and run away. And the captain and the crew have to, deal with the fact that they have abandoned their country, their home, in order to save their own skins, which creates an interesting conflict. After hiding for a few months, they resurface and discover a group of civilians on a makeshift raft of sorts, where they've connected all their boats together and they have been hiding there since the start of the apocalypse. And since these people have a nuclear submarine, they decide to offer to stay with these people and provide them with power, making them the de facto leaders of the raft since they are providing a resource that these people desperately need. But this creates the issue of zombies starting to climb up the anchors of the people's boats, trying to, climb on since they can see a source of light. This is the only instance that zombies actually show up in this short story, which I'll get back to later. Anyway, after a few weeks of living with these people, the raft is all of a sudden attacked by a submarine that came from China. Everyone is freaked out, so the people on the nuclear submarine decide to dip again, leaving behind the people on the raft with no power and a sinking raft. Again, abandoning a place that they would call home to save their own skins. After destroying the submarine, the captain becomes depressed because he assumes his son is actually on that submarine, because his son is a captain of another submarine, and assuming since he is loyal to the country, he becomes depressed because he believes he has killed his own son. This feels like the ultimate betrayal to the captain, so he decides to head to the Arctic and hide out there for the rest of the apocalypse. And after a few more months, another submarine shows up, and as they're getting ready to attack it, they receive a transmission from none other than the captain's son. They are all shocked to find out that the country has been having a massive civil war since they were away, trying to stop the officials of the Chinese government sending more people to die in the war that the crew of the nuclear submarine didn't even want to fight in the first place. And since the submarine is the only nuclear asset left available to the people, they are asked to come home and help finish the war, which they do, which brings a happy ending to everything. This story alone has a more interesting conflict than the entire movie World War Z does. There's obviously more to it, I've only told a summary, so I would highly recommend going to check out that specific story in the link that I've left down in the description below. I mentioned earlier that zombies only show up once during that story, which you would think that they would show up more considering the book is called World War Z, about a zombie war. The thing is though, I believe that a good zombie story doesn't have too much zombies in them. They use them sparingly and usually use them to progress the characters' motivations. Zombie stories should focus on their characters and not necessarily how the zombies work. And I'm not saying that they can't have zombies in their story at all. You are totally allowed to have that in your zombie story. Like you can have like a fight with zombies or a massive zombie horde. As long as you are focusing on the characters who are fighting them, that's what creates an interesting story. The characters are what keep the story going. And don't just take my word for it. Here's what George A. Romero, the guy who created the concept of the zombie before anyone knew what a zombie was, had to say about characters in zombie movies.
I thought it was some sort of punishment. Something was happening that was beyond our understanding. I felt that it didn't matter at all. What should matter is that this extraordinary thing is happening, and people are still arguing about upstairs, downstairs, who's the boss. They're still arguing about their own agendas instead of facing the problem. And that's really what all of my zombie films have been about.
I feel like people in World War Z, the book, are more relatable than the Jerry in World War Z the movie. And the thing is, a lot of them are unlikable characters. But the thing is, you can understand their motivations and relate to them. Maybe you won't be the person to, send out a rabies vaccine as the cure to the zombie virus, but a lot of people like to make money, which is the reason why that character decided to make a cure to the zombie virus. I feel like it makes the story more engaging when you're learning about these flawed characters and how they influenced the zombie war. To be completely fair to the movie, Jerry is protecting his family, which I feel like a lot of people would most likely try and protect their family during a zombie apocalypse. But I feel like it's such a generic and overdone motivation for a character to have. And I think zombie media has started to understand that. Like, look at The Last of Us with Joel and his motivations, or Donald Harris in 28 Weeks Later. Both characters have massive flaws and make super huge mistakes, but that's kind of what makes them interesting. And I feel like the characters in the book are showing us their true colours and telling us what they did during these fairly intense situations. And I think the coolest part of the book is that we are hearing this from all different angles, so we're not just listening to government officials talk about this, we are listening to the common citizen, to the common soldier. And it's really cool to have all these different perspectives because it makes it feel more real. It feels like you're just getting a peek into what this world is like, and I just love the immersion that this book brings, especially since every single interview is written with what I think is such realism, and they feel like real people talking to a government official about what they dealt with and what they did during this zombie war. Now, the biggest issue I actually have with the movie is the fact that the solution to the zombie virus is incredibly dumb. It's like, oh no, that person's sick, so me as a zombie, I'm not going to bite him because he is sick. And to me, this creates like a lot of questions, like what do the zombies consider sick and how do they sense the fact that this person is sick? What if someone was diagnosed with a mental illness? Would that count as that person being sick, or does the zombie just go for them? That's the weird thing about it. The virus brings up more questions than it does answers, and that's just annoying, and they should have just kept it simple like the book does. You get bitten or scratched, you're infected. That's it. I feel like in the book, the zombies are so much more of a threat because there is no way to truly combat them without using brute force. So it means that the characters and the people of the world have to work together to fight off this zombie horde. And spoilers for the end of the book, they don't actually get rid of all the zombies by the end. They are still searching for them. They're going for the catacombs of Paris, or they're going underwater to try and make sure that the zombies don't end up wandering back onto land or coming out of caves and stuff and eating people and causing the virus to start again. But the thing is, the people earned the victory of the zombie war, while I feel like in the movie they do not earn the victory because it just feels like a cheap cop-out so they can get a happy Hollywood ending without too much complicated baggage behind it. Again, in real life, things just don't disappear. Like with COVID-19, I hate to say it, but I'm assuming that there's going to be people who still get COVID-19 years down the line, and that's an unfortunate thing to say, but it's true. We aren't just going to simply get rid of COVID-19. Just kind of like these people in the book aren't just going to get rid of zombies by some magical cure. Not every problem can go away with a flash, but they can be dealt with, and that's what the book does. They deal with the problem the best they can with what they've got, and that's what makes it more interesting and much more complicated, and I like that. It feels like real life instead of a happy little ending with a little bow wrapped on top, you know what I mean? Hopefully you do. Anyway, let's move on to the last bit. So I've pretty much gone over all of the reasons why I believe the movie doesn't work and the book does. But the thing is, I would actually like to see a good adaptation of the book instead of just a blockbuster summer film. And I would like to make a suggestion for what that should be. Because honestly, I would actually like people to, get access to these stories because they're really good stories. The problem is, not many people like to read anymore, and that's completely fair. Honestly, I don't read that many books myself. Like, I'm not a massive bookworm like I've made myself out to be during this entire essay. If they were going to do a faithful adaptation of the book though, I do not think that they should do it in movie form, because I think it would just be way too hard and overcrowded with a bunch of different information, and not many people would like that because it's very disjointed. I think it would be much better suited in a series, like a TV series medium. Like, each episode focuses on, you know, one aspect or story from the book. And if it goes too long, it can even be cut into 2 episodes maybe. I think it would be fairly easy to cut different sections of the book into different seasons. Like, you know, The Great Panic has an entire season dedicated to it, and All Out War has an entire season dedicated to it. The thing is, I feel like this show would be a very expensive show to produce, especially if they're trying to do it in live action, and if they want to capture the scale of the books. I feel like it would be better to do it in an animated medium instead. Since there are so many different locations in the book, it would be easier to do it in animation because they can just jump around each episode, not having to worry about, you know, casting people and going to all the different locations around the world, or building up a massive set in order for it to work. Because with animation, all you really need to do is, like, you know, draw it out. And I mean, to be honest, again, I'm not an animator or anything, so I actually don't know how much work or how hard it actually is to truly animate this. But I can imagine that it being a very hard thing to do, especially if they're not giving the right budget and the right amount of hours and proper time. I know there's a lot of factors to it, but it would be really cool to see this actually come to fruition, and, you know, see this, you know, coming up in like Netflix or something like that. Again, having each episode focus on a specific character, it means that you get more time with them and you can flesh them out a bit more. And even so, you could come up with new characters if you really want to, and come up with entirely new stories. So if you run out of stories that you want to use in the book, you know, they could just like come up with their own. The thing is that since this is happening all over the world, they can even like include all walks of life, and we get to learn more and more about different cultures maybe, and how they might be affected by such a strange and insane situation, you know? The book already does stuff like this already, so I don't think it would be too hard to, you know, push more different types of people into the TV series if it was to happen. Plus, honestly, I think it would be just really cool to bring in voice actors from all around the world, because maybe it'll even like bring them more work, because, you know, companies in America are like, oh, this voice actor is actually really good, you know, maybe we should hire them for our movie or TV show, you know? And giving animators, like, you know, the time and money to, like, you know, really put their heart and soul into this, I think it would be amazing. Like, imagine like seeing like how stylized each episode could get and stuff like that. Like, every episode doesn't need to have the exact same art style. Maybe it does for continuity, but at the same time, I feel like they can go crazy with this sort of thing and really let their creative juices flow and stuff like that. Like, I don't want the show to have like a style of animation like every other adult cartoon would. I think it would be really cool if they went for something like Clone High, you know, like that kind of animation style, but like, you know, I guess less cartoony, but you get what I'm saying. Like, that's a kind of unique art style. And I think if they really worked on, like, you know, a very kind of like dark and dreary type of art style for the World War Z animated show, if it was to happen, you know, it'll just make it stand out from the rest of zombie media that we have been getting throughout the years. Because I think we all know that zombie burnout is becoming a very real thing, especially since, you know, a lot of zombie movies are just the same generic thing. We do have some outliers though, like Train to Busan and stuff like that, but even then, those are like lightning in the bottle type things, you know? I would just love to see a really good animated show about the World War Z universe. But seriously though, if you're like an executive producer or like Max Brooks himself, like, come on man, hit me up. I've got a ton of ideas for an animated show and I really think it could work. Anyway, that's all I really had to say about World War Z and why I like the book better than the movie, and also my pitch for an animated series. But thank you so much for watching this video, guys. I really appreciate it. We put a ton of effort into this video, especially Jack. He's the one who pulled all these clips together for me, and I cannot thank him enough for doing that for me. But if you like this type of content, you should definitely give us a, a little sub, subscribe down below and like the video, and, tell me what else you might want to hear me talk about. I don't know, because I'm still coming up with new ideas, because I would really like to do more of these types of videos, because they're fun. Again, thank you all for watching, and I will hopefully see you in the next video.